what I advocate for these days is to be 100% engaged, but not be attached. And that, it's more important how we go through this than the result itself.
So welcome again to Transformation Talk. I'm Tyro Hassan, the director of Brightline at the Project Management Institute. We'll hear about the stories of two digital transformations at UNOPS, United Nations Office for Project Services, one that occurred several years ago and one that is currently ongoing. For the former, with the distance of times, there are victories to cherish and sobering lessons to learn, as we will see. And for the latter, in an attempt to trying to keep good practices while at the same time avoiding the mistakes. With two stories of transformation within the same organization, but with a distance of time, promises to provide interesting perspective. And to share these stories, we are really privileged to welcome Tushar Dighe, Chief Information Officer and Director of Information Technology Group at UNOPS. So Tushar joined UNOPS in 2006, where he began as a system architect. Since then, he has worked in several capacities, including strategic business advisor, ICT enterprise reporting lead, and director of a business innovation and improvement program. In this latter role, Tushar led a team to help transform the administration of UNOPS operations through a more integrated and efficient set of processes, system, and reporting mechanism. Today, as director, Tushar leads IT at UNOPS, bringing in a culture of innovation to deliver solutions for the organization beyond technology. And I need to add that actually prior to joining UNOPS, Tushar co-founding an award-winning business management software company and was managing director of a software company in India. Personally, I should say I was really privileged to work with Tushar when I was with UNOPS for 4.5 years. And I remember, I still have it in my mind, a presentation that Tushar delivered at the UNOPS back then global management meeting in 2014, if my memory serves me right. And it was more like a rally. It was inspiring. And it does not matter really where you sat at that time within the organization. You were prepared to support the program. Very, very fascinating, the role that Tushar played back then. And I reached out to Tushar about 3 months ago, and he kindly agreed to share with us the tales of these two transformations. Welcome, Tushar.
Thank you, Tahiru. Thank you for that great introduction. And hello to everyone. Quite a few countries here today, I can see. And hopefully you'll get something useful out of this talk. I have to say right off the bat that what I will be sharing is my experiences. So my opinion, it's a personal account of the transformation that we went through. This is the brief, the structure, a brief bio, then a background of UNOPS, then the stories. Both the stories, I'll go through why we did the transformation, what we did, how we did it, and the lessons learned. And of course, I'll be spending more time on the lessons learned part and a lot less time on the why, what, and how. And then, of course, some reflections at the very end. So first, quick bio from myself. The picture that you see on the left was is of me when we did the last transformation. And the picture on the right is now. I was young and naive back then. And now I'm old and naive. In India, I've been in IT since 2008. So that would be at the age of 18. I've basically had professional jobs since then. I was in business for 11 years, and I've been with UNOPS for the past 18 years. 3 of those were in the field in Afghanistan, and 15 years in a corporate function. The only reason for this bio is so that you understand where I'm coming from. What's my personal journey. Okay, now for a quick background of UNOPS. And again, this is just for context. So UNOPS is an organization that where we do about 800 to 1,000 projects every year. Last year, we delivered about 3.5 billion worth of services. And we're about 6,000 to 7,000 people. You can see the spread of our projects around the globe. We are typically in almost every fragile state. We are in most low income countries and so on. So that's where we do our work. At any given point of time, we are in 100 plus countries, and we have suppliers and personnel that we do payments in 100 or more currencies on a daily basis. In terms of what UNOPS does, we do infrastructure. So we do physical infrastructure like roads, schools, clinics, hospitals, and so on. Project management, of course, is in our name. It's the United Nations Office for Project Services. Procurement is a big part of what we do, and this is public procurement. And of course, we have some services in the human resources and the financial management side of things as well, in terms of grant management and so on and so forth. Just to give you an idea or some sense of the kind of impact that we make. This is, I think, last year or the year before. As you can see, it's like we might be delivering a certain number of kilometers of roads. We might be delivering, in this case, we're looking at like 700 million of COVID-19 support and so on and so forth, right? So there's a whole lot of impact that UNOPS is able to make across the world through our projects. So that's just in terms of the UNOPS context, and we can jump right in and go straight into the details. So the first one here was a transformation program that we called the Business Innovation and Improvement Program. This was from mid 2014 to 2016. And essentially what we were trying to do was take the mess of systems that we had at the time. We had an ERP, and we had 18 other satellite systems around it. We had a lot of people having to do things in different systems and re-enter data and all of those kinds of things. The technology was reaching end of life, and essentially what we were trying to do was integrate all of that, make it more sensible, and to lower transaction costs and to get some efficiency out of a digital ecosystem. So as you can see, it's kind of, I would call it, looking at it today, I would say kind of like a low value add in terms of impact. But still, it was a huge amount of work, as you know, given the scale of the organization, 100 plus countries, payments in more than 100 currencies on a daily basis. So we replaced our ERP. We took 16 of the 18 corporate systems and we embedded them within the ERP, the functionality. At that point of time, UNOPS was outsourcing its payroll and treasury functions. We insourced that function, and of course that went into the ERP. And there was some process re-engineering, I would say, that got done. If you see the charts on top, we started with the ERP covering 34% of the functionality, and we ended with the ERP covering 76% of the functionality, and then essentially integrating all the other systems. And this was an absolutely crazy program. If you ask me today, I would say never do that again. We did all of this with a team of 20 people, and that's 20 total. So that includes program management, change in communications, business analysis, design, development, implementation, testing, system support as well. So that means first line of support to users. 20 people was the entire team. We did it through what we could call assisted implementation. So that means we had our internal resources. That means these 20 people that were trained, and then we implemented it ourselves. And as we'll see later, there's a lot of benefits that we've seen, not just in the implementation, but over the years, we've been able to maintain a very lean operation. And the organization has been able to maintain its systems at very low cost because of this. It was 1.5 years, start to finish, and I can tell you, we literally killed ourselves doing it. I have a few of my team members from that time that are here on this call, and each one of us has stories. So, what did we learn? What worked? Essentially, we could say that we delivered this program with just 20 people in this size and scale of an organization in 1.5 years, solely on the basis of technical skills. So we had very good technical skills in the team. We delivered on time, and in fact, we delivered under budget, which is not often heard of for transformation programs of this nature. As I mentioned, we in-house the expertise. So that has made us self-sufficient, not just during the implementation, but even until now, there were no interruptions to business operations. So that means when we went live, operations continued with no pause. We were able to do the payroll, we were able to pay suppliers and all of that. There were always some teething issues and some instances where we had some issues, but there was no large-scale interruption of any kind of business operations. One of the things that worked well was this concept that we had at that time of having local champions. So people in the field offices that were trained, and then they trained the others at the local level. So that really helped. But what also helped was we had a traveling training team. So as we went live, the training team went to different regions of the world and was training people and helping them get on board. And of course, I think it's a good thing that nobody died, although, as I said, we almost killed ourselves doing this. So what did not work? There's always these aspects that what does not work. At least for me, I focus more on that. That's my nature. The time frame was completely unrealistic to do something of this scale in an organization of this scale that is so geographically dispersed as we are. I think was crazy. So we had an absolutely overloaded team. By the time we went live, we were burnt out completely. And one of the things I think to remember here is that go live is just the beginning. And that's not something we realized, because we needed then to keep going into the hypercare period, and any system of this size and scale takes at least 6 months to stabilize. So while there was no interruption on business operations, we had to be, and we were continuing to work 18-hour days well past the go live date. There was an extreme resource crunch, of course, going along with the unrealistic time frame. One of the aspects there was this lack of ownership, and this is something that I'll talk about at the end as well. Basically, this aspect of, well, the program is going to deliver what we need. The program, just these 20 people will give us what we need. So there was very little ownership coming in. Some of the things in terms of, we didn't, at that time, the organization was also very low tech. So we were using like free Skype accounts, and we didn't have a document repository. This was back in 2014, 2015. So, we have a lot more tools in the market right now. They were back then as well, but UNOPS had not adopted them. So we didn't quite have this operating environment in place to be able to work well. No exit plan is something I'm going to come back to again in the end as well, which essentially meant that when we started the program and when we were running the program, we did not think about how would we transition from the program ending and all of these things that the program was doing as into business as usual. So there was no plan for that. And that really hit us hard as we came to the close of the program. And the last thing I think that also was something that didn't work, which we could have and should have been doing better, is we stopped our communication more or less when we went live. Of course, we had things like, well, if there were any bug reports or any enhancements that came in, we reported them, but we didn't do this communication or celebration of success. We did not inform the organization of all the things, all the benefits that we had got through the program. And that narrative and the story that's told at the end, I think, is very important, both for the organization as well as for the team that's part of it. So that's something that was definitely something we do differently this time. Another poll from your experience, what the greatest risk you believe is in the success of a digital transformation. So typically, what have you seen going wrong? Is it the lack of engagement from the program sponsor? Is it the lack of stakeholder engagement? Is it the scope that maybe keeps changing and expanding? Is it weak technical delivery? Is it lack of resources? Yeah, lack of stakeholder engagement or management seems to be, and the lack of engagement from program sponsor. I think that the first two are very linked, because if you have a program sponsor that's not engaging, I think getting the engagement from the stakeholders often becomes challenging. Even the first program that we ran, that's more or less what we saw. Although in our case, I would say lack of resources became, given the extreme resource crunch that we went through, was a big factor for us. Now moving on to the second story, and I'm mindful here of time. I want to make sure I finish in the next 5 to 7 minutes, or a little longer than that. So this one is what we are doing now, and as you can see, of course, the picture on the side now, we are looking at this shiny new future. So this time we are saying that it's a business transformation and digitalization program. And this time, as opposed to the last time, it's a lot more aspirational. It's a lot more forward-looking. Now we're not in that situation anymore where we have this mess of systems and so on. We're looking at it much more in a mission-focused manner. How do we better achieve the SDGs? How do we enhance the value add that we put into our programs? How do we have fit-for-purpose systems? And also some part of it is to address the scale of the organization. When we implemented the previous set of systems, we were at delivering about $1.4 billion, and now we're about 3 times that size. So those systems that we put in place back then have sustained us now for the past 7 years, helping us grow times. And of course, a part of the why is also in terms of taking advantage of new technologies. And of course, no talk on digital transformation can go by these days without at least mentioning Gen AI. So that's there. The scope of it, we are once again looking at saying let's get a new ERP system in place. It often forms the center of digital. We're looking at addressing some of the gaps in functionality that we have, which has come about primarily because in the past 7 years, we have taken on more types of services and more types of more complex services and so on. So there's some gaps that's come from that. And then there's a bunch of things about the institutional capacity and digital dexterity and having fit for purpose specialized. So whereas the previous time we looked at basically what you could call generic systems, in the sense it's like finance, procurement, HR, project management, and so on. Now we are looking for more like systems that can be more fit for purpose for infrastructure management or grants management and so on. So some of these specialized area of work. Now the how, and this is we are just about starting up this program, so it's not started yet. It's in the planning stages, but we are thinking now of 3 to 5 years as the program. So that means taking what we learned from the past in terms of the unrealistic time frame. We are now looking at a work reassignment of personnel while maintaining current reporting lines. And so whether it's IT or change or business policy units and so on. This is to address this aspect that we saw last time about the lack of buy-in. Also go into this area a bit more a little later. We're looking at a phased rollout, again, in terms of take the divisional or regional leadership as product owners. So not to take a very headquarters-centric approach, but to take the approach of ownership of where the work actually gets done. And we are also addressing the governance aspect to kind of make sure that the same governance mechanisms that we have for the organization as a whole are the governance mechanism for this program. Now, I wouldn't call this lessons learned so much as what we've seen so far. One of the things that we notice is some amount of systems entropy, and I don't think this is fully understood by anyone really, but there does seem to be this tendency for systems over a period of time to essentially degenerate in some way. Either that or the organization gets tired of looking at the same system and using the same system. But there's some entropic element there that maybe there's researchers out there that can look at. As I mentioned, right now, it's what we're looking at is far more aspirational. It's not survival based as it was the last time. So that's in one way a good thing. On the other hand, the bad thing is that there's no burning platform. So that means the imperative to change. We are finding that inertia a bit difficult to fight. But even then, I think the aspirational part, and that we are now looking at a much higher order of benefits, I think. And then, of course, again, on the negative side, we see that since the organization has grown so much, there seems to be more of a process focus rather than an outcome focus. And that's something that we are fighting against. The other aspect is in terms of the marketplace itself. Back then, 2016 or so, compared to now, There's a whole lot more in the market. The cloud-based solutions are everywhere. There's a whole bunch of this click here to start a free trial kind of thing. So we are seeing challenges in terms of user experience, in terms of the kinds of user experience that have on in their personal lives, from the kind of tools that are readily available in the market versus we bring them into an enterprise and have enterprise tools, and people feel as if they've stepped back a decade in terms of user experience. Right? The ERPs are not known for great user experiences. There is some element of unrealistic expectation. I think that part is always true. There's always kind of thinking that this program will solve everything. That's the second story. I thought we could quickly once again switch to a poll within your organizations. Which role is seen to be responsible for digital transformation? And I think this also ties in some way to this aspect of sponsorship. Right? How involved, how engaged is that sponsor? So I guess if you're looking at a RACI matrix, for instance, is it accountability versus responsibility? So that means whereas it might be the CIO role that is actually doing it from an organizational perspective. And I can see that, yeah, so it looks like the majority kind of see the CIO role taking on that. This is something that I believe is an issue. We'll leave it at that. But I think in terms of senior stakeholder engagement, I think over the years we probably, I think it's ideal if the organization believes, well, it's the CEO that's actually responsible for it, because the size and scale of the kind of changes that these programs require, I think that those need some very, very strong leadership from the top. So some reflections now. That some of these, I mean, I've categorized them into individual and organization. As I said at the start of the talk, this is my personal experience that I'm relaying. It's not, I'm not here pretending to be an expert. This is a transformation in action, meaning when I've done this, this is what I've seen. Now, there's the usual aspect, of course, on the individual side. Watch out for burnout, put people first, and so on and so forth. And as I said earlier, to realize that going live is just the beginning. So if you put everything you have into just going live, then you're going to need that extra bit afterwards. The second two are maybe a bit weird, or maybe they're a bit more philosophical. But I've seen this over time about attachment. And what I've seen is when programs like this are run, then the person leading that program, in this case, it would have been myself, and the team gets an over attachment to what's being delivered. So that means that any criticism of that or any kind of there's too much of this identification with what's being delivered. And in my experience, what that does is that it promotes blindness. So it essentially promotes blindness towards the fitness or the quality of the product. But I think more importantly, it promotes blindness in terms of seeing other people's perspectives. So my what I advocate for these days is to be 100% engaged, but not be attached. And that it's more important how we go through this than the result itself. At the organizational level, again, the usual sufficient time and resources and so on. But the second aspect there, in my experience, has been critical. As I said in the previous program, we didn't have any exit strategy. And what we are doing this time is that we are operating within the business. So that means if we are implementing HR systems, then the resources that implement that sit with HR. So that, to kind of like look at it from the perspective of, well, if we run a program and we pull all these resources out into a program organization, where would they go after the program finishes? And that's where we are actually keeping them and implementing it in place. So instead of moving people out and so on, this is where we are trying to address this aspect of ownership. And I think that's a big, big thing, which is, again, with the next point, which is buy-in. And I would say, once again, if it takes a little longer, depending on different constraints and so on, it's fine. I think it's harder to take the time to get the buy-in, and it's very difficult to get people on board and get them convinced and so on. But it's applicable. And then, of course, in terms of a gradual rollout, to consider the capacity of the organization, because it's easy to put out a whole bunch of things and to expose an organization to a whole bunch of things and say, here's all this new stuff. But to remember that there's now people on the other side who now have to absorb all of this, have to change their ways of working on a daily basis. And at work is where we spend the majority of our time. So to consider that impact on people. And finally, just a quick reminder, I guess, to myself and all of us. Again, if we think of, well, it's a digital transformation or it's a transformation project of whatever kind, and to ask, transformed. So if it's a digital transformation, are we transforming the systems? And my belief, and that's why I've put a picture of myself back then and now, is that it's a transformation of people. It's always a transformation of people. Systems can change, and as part of that transformation, if us as the people implementing that transaction and that transformation uh, or bringing that transformation about, I think it's very important that we, as the leaders of that transformation, also transform. And in fact, I would say that if we find that we've gone through a transformation and then we're the same, I don't think something wrong there. So that's it from me, and I hope that was useful, and I hope we can now go into a discussion and talk about and take your questions and so on. Thanks. Over to you, Tahir.
Thank you so much, Tushar, for this insightful presentation and sharing real stories. It's not second hand, it is really you being involved up and front center and facing the situation there. We have a quick one from Kevin, and Kevin is asking, how do you contend with the reality that digital transformation are never really done, given the pace and perpetual nature of change within organization, tech stack, and so on? So your last one was maybe in 2016, so seven years ago, and then the new one starting in between 7 years after. But yet many things are changing and they're not waiting. How do you manage that or handle that?
Yeah, yeah. Thanks, Tahir, and that's a very good question. And in fact, when I talked about this implement in place, so that means that instead of bringing a program team together, forming a team into a program structure, and then implementing it that way, to keep resources where they would go when the program ends anyway. So if it's an HR system, if those resources are going to transition back into HR, or those technical resources are going to transition back into IT, to keep them in IT while running this program. And that's exactly from this purpose I talked about buy-in, but also because of this aspect that digital never stops. And in fact, that's why it's also important not to think that it's a destination. So that means that when we go live, that's the end, finished. And I have a colleague of mine here at UNOPS that tells me many people have this concept of software as a brick. That means you bake a brick and it's done. You never have to do anything to it again, right? And that's not the nature of software. Software is something that and systems are something that you have to continuously work on. So that's the aspect that I think to get the organization into this continuous improvement mindset while running the program, as well as then transition them into that same mindset once the program is run. Yeah, that's what I would say.
Excellent. Excellent. We have another one from Yagavi, and she was asking what consideration you foresee for the transformation we are experiencing, given the AI acceleration. So you mentioned AI in one of your slides there, and this is the top topic today. Like, what consideration are you giving to it, and how do you plan to use it?
That's an excellent question, and as I said when it came up in the slide as well, you can't possibly have any kind of a presentation on anything digital without mentioning generative AI. That's the hot topic these days. One thing we are seeing in the marketplace, of course, is that every major product, whether that's an ERP or a CRM or whatever kind of product it may be, is incorporating generative AI capabilities into their product. So from an enterprise perspective, and especially like we are not in the technology business, right? We are in the business of doing things and use technology. So the quickest access that we are seeing to this kind of capability is through these enterprise products that are implementing the functionality. In fact, I think there's a huge race right now of everybody bringing it in. One thing I would say is that while there's a race, as with any new technology, the possibilities and the use cases will evolve as time goes. So we are mindful of that to say that this is great, and some of the capabilities look fantastic, but we'll only know how best to utilize it as time progresses, we as well as the rest of the world, right? So.
Thank you. Thank you. And there was another one that kind of struck me when you were mentioning that at some point, I mean, with a new program, people will stay within the functional area. And I know sometimes when people have that dilemma, do I support the program or do I support my day-to-day on work? People tend to maybe default to the function. How are you handling that tension, or are you seeing any challenge as you're starting it?
Yeah, thanks, Tahir. And that's a very good question because, I mean, the easier thing to do is to form this program organization, pull everybody out, bring them out of operations. The team might even like physically be sitting together and so on, and form this 100% into the program. You're no longer with the operation side of it, and do this. And that actually is easier to manage. But I think we see the benefits of doing it the other way to be far greater than making it easy. So one thing we are doing is that the resources that might sit within the operations that will be doing the work of the program will be 100% dedicated. So we are making sure that they have terms of references and they have jobs that are 100% dedicated to that program. So while they sit in the operations, they are doing the program's work and they don't have other jobs and other tasks. So that's one thing. But I mean, to bear in mind that we are starting out now, and these things will start getting in place, and we will see challenges. Pretty sure. Even no matter how much you say that, well, it's 100% dedicated. Operations always has this capacity to absorb every bit of resource it can get. So that'll happen, and we'll have to deal with it. But as I said, I think the benefits far outweigh any potential issues with this.
Excellent. And now talking about benefits, you were mentioning the challenges in post-program communication or celebrations and so on. And this is one challenge that many programs do face because sometimes people feel, oh, the program is done. So let's say technically the software is delivered and then the job is done. But often it is after the program delivery that you start seeing or realizing the benefit. And if you don't communicate on this, then it seems like you haven't done something. So of course, hindsight is always 2020. Learning from it, what need to change, or what are you planning to integrate? And I'm saying it for all people involved in transformation. The end date is not the end date. Actually, getting the result. Why you're doing the transformation is what matters most, and you don't get the result just from day one. So help us understand, based on the learning that you had, what is changing.
Yeah, thanks, Tahir. And again, great question again. I think this is where this aspect of continuous improvement and this aspect of the way that we are kind of also thinking of it is that the program is the coordinating mechanism. The program is where we say we are going to do this piece of work. We have this amount of funds to do it, and this amount of time to do it, and then to do all the coordination that's required, and to do all the checking on the benefits and what are the objectives that we are looking at and the benefits realization and that kind of thing. But again, to do it in a way as if the organization is normally operating, right? So that means that all the communication that goes out doesn't go out only from the program. In fact, the majority of the communication we expect to go out from each of these what we could call practices, right? Whether if it's HR related systems that are being released or policies or processes that are being changed, then HR will communicate. And if it's procurement related, procurement will communicate, and so on. So this is also from the perspective of not just during the program, but past the program, this communication and success stories afterwards, but also going far into the future to build this capacity within the organization to get into a regular cycle of improvements and communication, right? So I think this is the idea that keep the program as a coordinating mechanism and build the capacity in the organization to communicate and improve.
Awesome. Thank you so much. We have one question that, of course, feel free to answer if it is not a confidential information, but if it is open, feel free to provide the information. What was the budget of the first program and the new one? Is there sufficient resources secured for new program?
Right. I'm not able to share specific numbers, but what I can say is that it was very, very, very low. I would compare it to, it was less than the cost of running IT, like for the organization in any regular year, right? So it was less than the IT budget. For the full 1.5 years with licensing costs for the new systems and all of that included, it was still less. So I think resources as well as funds was an extreme constraint back then. We are trying right now, obviously, to not do the same thing. As you saw, we are saying it's going to be about 3 to 5 years, so that means a sufficient amount of time. And we are also making sure that there's sufficient resources. But one of the aspects in terms of resources is by expanding the time and by doing gradual rollouts, as well as by placing the resources in place wherever they need to be anyways. Because if you have to do something in a short amount of time, it's time, cost, quality, right? I mean, you need more resources, and of course it's not proportional. But to a certain extent, by expanding the time frame, I think we also get to a more realistic resource need. But I mean, we all know this. There will never, ever be enough resources. It's simply not possible for anything to have enough resources. So more, but let's see.
It is more like a table stake there. Now, going back to the time, because we were writing a book, let's say, that we call we call it the Bright Line Transformation Compass. So it is a process that we're sharing about transformation. And one thing that came up, at least as we were uncovering good practices, for time, actually, most of the people that we were consulting with, they will say they wish they've done it faster, not slower. And I'm hearing you saying maybe you could benefit from more time or extending that duration. I just want to maybe peel the onions there, because sometimes if it is too long, then you don't have that commitment, and then it loses steam, and then you don't get the result, and you lose the commitment as well. So how do you reconcile that? I just want to make sure that we're hearing you correctly there.
Yeah. Again, very good point, Tahiro. And I think, with all of these elements, so if we talk about resources, too few is a problem. Too many is a problem too, because too many means now there's coordination issues have escalated. Every time a new person is added, the coordination is exponentially increased. So similarly with time, doing it in a short period means it's almost kind of like the Band-Aid approach, right? Like rip it off or peel it slowly. It's the same dilemma. So in the sense that how do you keep an organization focused for a long period of time? Whereas if you do it in a short period of time, then you can get people's focus for a short period of time, quickly do all the changes and move on. And there's advantages and disadvantages of both. The way that we're seeing it, and again, we're taking this from this perspective that if we look at, what are we trying to achieve? So that means if I take it from the perspective of outputs, suppose I say that the program ends and we have new systems, or we have, a bunch of more fit for purpose systems and so on. If that's the output, then I don't think the program has worked. But if we can say the organization now knows how to go through a process of continuous improvement, then I think the program has worked. So this is again from the perspective of this time. So to build primarily this capacity to continuously improve, so that even though it takes longer to do, we are then looking at building an institutional capacity so that once the program ends, we expect the organization to be going through these same improvement cycles for perpetuity, essentially. So we might not have complete changes of systems, but we might have a continuous improvement of them. The other aspect we've seen is like with short periods of time. So we say, okay, let's do it quickly. The expectation is that a whole bunch of things get done, release, we are done. But what we've seen is that the most valuable part of deploying systems comes after you've deployed it. So that means no matter how much feedback you get, user acceptance testing, and all kinds of things, systems, once they are released and they hit reality on a daily basis when people start using them, that's when the improvements come in. And if you don't have, if the program has ended by then it's very difficult for those things to get done. And then they stay undone. So that means forever it remains an 80% product. It almost never reaches that 100% or close to that.
Thank you. Thank you. There is a question from Mark, and Mark is touching the lack of engagement, which was also surfaced as the biggest issue from the people who responded. How could you have made it greater priority with leadership and the sponsor first time? I know sometimes people talk about put it in people per, the evaluation program or so on.
Yeah.
Like, how would you?
Yeah. Thanks, Tahiru. And I think I would not take, at least my own perspective is not to take it from that perspective of put it on people's personnel objectives and their part of their appraisals, personal appraisal at the end of the periods. Because that's more like I see that more as a stick rather than a carrot.
A stick.
Yeah. Whereas I always prefer, if there's beating to be done, then I always prefer to beat people with a carrot instead, right? But I would say this is also where the time aspect comes in, because engagement requires time. So not only time from the people, but it requires a great deal of time from us who would be running the program or implementing this change. And so that time means everything from meeting people just to have coffee to chatting with them informally in other forums, and then continuous engagement with them through whether it's workshops or meetings or all kinds of things like that. And not just once or twice, but again and again and again. And also to realize that, there's no such thing as, you get a stakeholder involved and finish, that's done, now you can move to the next stakeholder. It's this thing of, it's a continuous process. It's the same as, if we have clients in our business, we can't just essentially service them once and say it's done now. We have to it's a continuous process. So that means a stakeholder that may be engaged right now may lose engagement as time goes by. So that means you have to go again and do it. So that's the part where, if I think also from my own personal transformation during this process, as I said, that the previous one was delivered on the basis of technical superiority, essentially. And I have realized that, that can get things delivered, but that's not ideal. That's not the benefit. You're not going to get the benefits that way. So now it's more of a people-centered approach. So if you have to spend 8 hours a day with people, talking to people, that's the job actually, and a continuous process. And once somebody is engaged, not to assume that they will continue to be engaged.
Yeah, no, thank you. And when you were mentioning the burning platform, I was linking it with engagement as well, because when there is no burning platform, then it could affect engagement as well. But then does the mission then become a burning platform? Because achieving the SDGs could maybe be, I don't know, the burning platform. That's yeah. Fundamental.
Exactly. And I think that's a very good point, and it's a big point, right? So again, to say, should there be a burning platform other than the mission of the organization? The mission of the organization itself should constantly and always be the burning platform. So doing it that way, I think, has these multiple benefits in terms of, it kind of touches into so many different aspects, including a cultural aspect of the organization. That the mission is at the center.
Excellent. We're getting more questions here, and we're getting to time as well, and the conversation can go on. I'll put one here from David Panetta, and he said, in the current labor market, high staff turnover is the norm. How would you approach a transformative initiative with a high turnover of stakeholders, internal and external, including sometimes sponsors also leaving? And just to add to that question, at the turn of the pandemic here, people are talking about, again, a big resignation, or I mean, Sadia Nadella was talking about the big reshuffle. So how do you cope in this highly, I mean, the person you have today is not there tomorrow. And I mean, you need to continue to re-engage and so on. What recommendation do you have?
Yeah, thanks, Tahir. And I don't think there's a magic bullet here, because if you had a magic bullet, then we would have solved one of the biggest issues that we're seeing these days. One thing I have to say is that in this space, so we are the United Nations, and the mission that we have is to achieve the SDGs and to alleviate poverty and to help people and deliver medical care and so on and so forth. So typically the kind of the profile of the people that are attracted to work for us have this mission-centered approach, right? They come to us because of our mission. So that does keep them with us longer than you might see in the private sector, for example. Not saying that what the private sector does is not important, just saying that there's more of this mission focus that people come in. But the other side of it, I guess, becomes, regardless of that, we'll still have attrition, right? People leaving, new people joining, and so on. And UNOPS is a project-based organization, so that in fact happens very often. Maybe not at very senior levels and so on, but in general, we are a project-based organization. Projects start, projects end. I guess one thing I would say is, our focus is to build institutional capacity. That obviously you can't, an institution is not a living entity, it's people. You have to build people's capacity. But there's a certain thing about institutional capacity where if you build that within people for sufficient periods of time, it kind of gets into the walls in some way, right? It like the organization, it just seeps in. So another person coming in also, then it is able to absorb that much quicker.
This is great, because I mean, when we think about culture, because we say culture in organizations, it's not written somewhere, but it is kind of what people feel, and it is natural and so on. And as a football fan, sometimes when there is a final and they say this team won maybe 10 times, but I'm asking, what does their winning 10 times has to do with the game that they play today? But them having won 10 times is actually creating something, even though it is new players. But that readiness, that can-do attitude or winning attitude is there, and that could be what's at the stage here. I know there are two more questions that we haven't gone through, but we are getting at time. So let me give you the ending words. But again, in thanking you as well, we really, really appreciate the time that you took here and for the amazing job that you're doing and work that you're doing at UNOPS. So really appreciate that. You have the end word here.
Thank you, Zahiru, and thanks for the opportunity to speak to everybody. Always happy to share and always happy to help. And I think if I would say one thing that I would kind of highlight in the presentation or the talk today, this aspect of being engaged but not attached. I think I have seen a great deal of benefit from that personally and professionally, and to everybody around the organization. So that's what I would end with. Thank you, Tahir.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Excellent. And then we'll have more transformation talks coming in the coming month. We're aiming for a monthly one. So have a good one wherever you join us from today. And thank you for your question, your engagement. Until then, take care. Bye-bye.